So BFO, would you give us what does that stand for?
Stands for blinding flash of the obvious. Much of what we do is, you got to be kidding, as soon as we hear the answer.
Yeah.
And that's how we came up with the name. It was one of those, why people have stoop shoulders and flat foreheads. I ask you a question, you go, I don't know. And I tell you the answer, you go, oh yeah. That's where the name came from.
Oh, very cute. So I'm very interested in you sharing today with us some of your coaching experience. And because I know you've worked with a very wide range of clients, I think that sets the stage for some of the things I want to ask you more about. Could you just tell us
Sure.
a bit of who do you work with?
I've worked across 17 different business sectors, and I've worked with clients from single operators
Yeah.
all the way through to 50,000 employees. So it's been a big range.
Wow.
My preference is the little bit smaller, so if they're 20, 25, 30, maybe 50 employees, because there's a place there that we can bolt in a change, a transformation, and we can do it fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So.
So what do people come to you with as, I know it's probably different for every client, but can you just give us an idea of what's some of the issues they come to you and say, this is what I'm up against?
Yeah, but it's primarily around change management. There's so many factors now in our industries, and the world is changing. I mean, the economies are going through unprecedented change, upheaval, and we don't know what to do. We really don't. And so because I'm a change artist, if you will, I also take people from, if they're going to try to get their company to go from $1 million to $5 million, how do you do that? Because in some cases, the infrastructure for $1 million company is actually only the infrastructure for a $500,000 company. It's already stretched to the max. So how do we now grow that company? So there's a place in that just looking at it from a different perspective, I do bring fresh eyes. I may not know anything about, for example, raw dog food, but I sure understand process.
Right.
And so when we look at that process and that new look, those new set of eyes sees that from such a different perspective, it helps to change the direction of the company and point it in a direction that's more profitable and certainly more effective from a process management point of view.
Okay. So as we go to the human part, what's the challenge with your clients in making that kind of transition? Because I'm hearing it's a pretty big jump, like as you and I have talked about, from good to great.
Yes.
I have to let go of good
Yes.
to get to great. What's the emotional, or however you think of it,
Yes.
that creates the stress or the struggle?
I was speaking on a podium about a year and a half ago, with a sports psychologist, and he said that he didn't like the principle of good to great. He thought the preposition was wrong. It's good or great. And I think there's a real good distinction there for the coaching that I do, is many of the companies that I work with and the people that I work with have done a good job, no question about it. And they are unwilling to give up that good. There's a superstition around it. We did that, it worked fine in the past, we should do it again. And it's harder, smarter, faster, wider, longer, deeper. Like, they do all that. And in fact, this goes to John Delacosta's work. It's a book that's now out of print, but he wrote a book called Working Wisdom. And there's a place that I believe we need to look at is, what's the wisdom behind what we need to do? We're doing this around our medicine and around our pharmaceuticals. We're going back to plants, for heaven's sake. And it's about time, because lots of the stuff they've been giving us doesn't do the job. It does a small piece of it. My job as a coach is, in an overall collective, is to try to do the job of creating a whole out of that, so that it's not just fixing the accounting, it's not just fixing the marketing, it's not just fixing people.
Right.
If it wasn't for people, most companies could do really well. The
I've
problem
heard
is
that.
people get in the way. Okay?
Exactly.
And so it's, how do I work with those people in a way that's going to serve those people and not trump them? Autocratic leadership is a thing of the past. We're done with that. But how do I collaborate? I mean, we're taught from the very get-go, when we talk right at the beginning, 750,000 sperm, and they're scrapping and fighting to be the one. So there's a competition built into everything. And then we put all these people together on a team, and we ask them to collaborate.
Right.
Well, they haven't got a clue.
Right.
And so how do we do that? And I believe that it's not just learning some skills, because the skills, I've seen them really skilled people. They all come together, and as a collective, they don't do very well together, because and it's not just the bolted on hat that says it's riveted to their head in terms of competition. We just don't know what to do.
Right.
And then there are some things in our way that I think from a human being point of view that have been bolted in precognition that also create challenges. They're like blind spots, and
Exactly.
we have no idea that we have them.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be called blind spots.
That's
so I believe that there's a body of work that's necessary to do, and many people don't have the appetite to look at that.
Okay, and I've been talking in this coaching series about blind spots and how critical it is to address what's in that blind spot.
Yes.
That's often where the problem is.
Yes.
Would you give some examples on what you found with clients? Because I know you are working with those blind spots using sometimes the prime potential process.
Yes. Yeah, the prime potential as a tool is probably one of the most effective tools for quick change. And again, quick is an underrated word. I think all too often we kind of think, yeah, well, it takes time to do some things. But we bolt in phobias. We don't practice phobias.
Nope.
We bolt them straight into our bodies, usually within the blink of an eye.
Yep.
Well, I
Them
think
together.
I think there's a potential in our lives, if that's the case for something that, in most cases, a phobia is not positive.
No.
Okay, I think sometimes they might be, but they're hard to find. So since a phobia is negative, if you will, I think we could bolt in as quickly positive things if we were
Yeah.
open to that possibility.
Yeah.
Prime potential opens that possibility.
So when you talk about blind spots and what's in the way, what have you found? Can you give us some examples with clients? What's been in the way with some of your clients? What type of issues, or is there
Wow.
any?
That's like saying what color's a car.
I-
Because even with a client, when we open up the possibility. So, for example, I have a client that was dealing with personal relationships. Business was doing well, but she kept picking things that weren't serving her in her in her personal relationship.
Right.
That was starting to bleed into the business relationship.
Okay.
And that was, for her, it was a revelation. She thought they were completely separate.
Right.
Well, what was happening is that many of the dysfunctional relationships that she was in her business environment were from that.
Oh,
And there was a complete unwillingness to look at it. So I call that a blind spot. Now, that's not everybody.
No.
I've had lots of clients that got great family lives, everything's fine, and this is melting down. So they don't have a blind spot in the family stuff, but somewhere over here. I mean, I've had some of my CEO clients can't balance a checkbook. Well, how can they be in charge of the money then? Like how do you bring in somebody that's effective to help you? That's why you have good CFOs. That's why you have good, staff around you to make sure that they can take care of those cracks in the armor.
Right.
But the blind spot stuff for me, it's an astonishing thing because, again, it's called a blind spot for a reason. And the challenge that I face with it is that many people that I have conversations with aren't willing to look at them. It's like the shadow side,
Right.
and it's scary.
Right.
Especially even some of our conventional faith in our religions and in our any kind of faith, they don't want to look at that. They just want to look at the good things. But we have to look at that. We
The
have
shadow,
to see it
yeah.
because if we don't look at it,
Yeah.
then we can't address it.
Yeah.
We don't have to dwell in it, but we have to at least look at it.
Reminds me of a fellow in a managerial position with real estate company, and he'd had a business failure before going into real estate. And when we were talking, that past experience, it was 10 years past, was still
Yes.
in his mind, and he was so afraid of doing anything that would put him out in a position where he could be criticized or
Yeah.
judged.
Yeah.
And
Or
so-
screw up again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so here he's now staying in this little box trying to perform well and, handicapping himself so severely that he's actually going to get the very thing he's afraid of.
Right.
He is going to fail.
Well, and I
at
think in that
producing.
context, what I find really fascinating is that it's like, don't think about a pink elephant with a blue necktie.
Yeah.
We say to ourselves, we don't want to be like our dad, we don't want to be like our mom, or I never want to have that failure again, and we repeat it and repeat it and repeat it.
Right.
Those are blind spots.
Yeah.
And it's hard to see them because when you're in the middle of it, it's like asking a fish, how's the water?
Yeah.
They don't have a clue because
No.
it's part of the soup.
Right.
It's part of the whole environment. And so teasing that apart and having somebody actually consider the possibility that they've got a blind spot, number one, especially if you're quite successful. I've had clients that are making 10, 12, 15, 20 million bucks a year, but they know something's missing,
Yeah.
something's up. There's a hollowness to that game. And, we can get into the whole conversation about, well, they got lots of money, so what would be their problems? They got the same kind of challenges everybody else does.
Yeah.
And when there's a hollowness in the game, that's where I believe we've got to look and see what the blind spots are.
So last question, how did you get into this work, the prime potential work? What's the history for you?
Well, I don't think there's enough time to have that conversation about all the bits, but what I will say is that through all my personal development work and for all the business work that I've done and all the courses I've taken and all the kind of little studying degrees and stuff, there was a place that I noticed that there was a gap between what people wanted to say they wanted to perform in their work and they couldn't get it. And it seemed baffling to me. And so it was constantly searching for something, whether it was personality profiling or whatever it might be. What was it that was in the way of that? And so I've been, in a way, striving. And, our friend Steve Davis talked about giving up your striver's license, which I loved. But I was striving for years to try to find how to close that gap.
Gotcha.
And Mirror's Point is one of those amazing tools that helps to close that gap in a way that is both transformative, and I hate using that word because everybody's using it, but it is transformative and quick. And I love that because many of my clients are really looking, not necessarily for quick fixes, but because they're willing to stay into a tough economy, but they want to know that there's going to be some fundamental changes and they can map them. It's like key performance indicators they can look at and really count on. Hi, I'm Bill Chalmers with BFO Consulting. And again, I want to challenge you when you're looking at adding a tool to your toolkit. Prime Potential helps you look at the world from a different perspective. Prime Potential is something that when you step into it, it's a whole new game. It changes you. You're going to be on skinny branches when you have the conversation, but your clients are going to be pulled sometimes, pushed, but they will go to a different level in the work that they're looking at. They will be able to increase their productivity, increase their business sense, increase their own intuition. It's hard to believe that people who are doing any kind of work wouldn't look at this, especially you as a coach, wouldn't look at this as a necessity to have in your toolkit. I don't use it all the time, but I know that I've got it and I can use it any time that it's warranted by the clients that I'm working with. Sign up, it's a lot of fun.